How's it going, guys? Welcome back to Explicitly Explained. I'm your host, Linder. Few announcements. We are going to be doing a collab with another good friend of mine, somewhat of a philosopher, you might add. He's just going to come in and jump in on a few of my dialogue and kind of chime in. Anyways, like and subscribe. Check out my channel. Check out my other content. I'll have some posts posted here up top. But yeah, let's get into it. So I have been looking at the arguments that are surrounding the moon landing, and obviously, as I predicted, the amount of flat Earth versus Earth, moon denying, all of these types of topics are now resurfacing. And it takes I will say that it takes a little bit of strategic planning when you're dealing with the media. The media is a very volatile medium for information to be, I would say, filtered through. And whenever you have something like a moon landing happening, or not even a moon landing, like we can even say just how they did the mission with the crew, which was just a flyby. They just flied by the moon and they took pictures. The entire mission was broadcasted via obviously the NASA channel, NASA Live. And again, I see these, and I'm not going to call them in bad faith conspiracy theorists. I'm just going to say this. There's a lot of people that do not believe that the moon landing happened. On top of that, they really don't even believe that NASA really goes to space at all. They believe that all of the shots taken by the International Space Station are all staged, that it's all done on a government basement somewhere, and that it's one of those things that when spoken about, they don't want to say anything because of the nature, meaning like the nature of the work that they do. So compartmentalization is a thing. I do believe that we went to the moon. I don't think that that's a lie. However, I do think that there is this weird level of secrecy when it comes to NASA and what they do. We know that they are the kinds of like agency that obviously is funded by the government. So taxpayer dollars go into that. We pay for NASA, basically. So obviously a lot of people might say, well, there's your incentive. There's the if you want to lie, I mean, you're gonna want to get paid for it. However, I have an issue with a lot of this framing that a lot of people take. The way that they frame, the fact that the moon landing didn't happen. They'll go with the he said, she said. And it seems to me that the standard of proof is very low for people who are flat earthers. Why do I say that? Well, I say that because there's a lot of people that they use the very same, like they'll try to argue that the concept of gravity is a way of trying to, I don't know, like dupe the public or something, and then they start to kind of I call it gaslighting because they attach this like theological connotation to it, and they start saying, "Oh, that you believe in this religion," and I'm a fanatic of science. I like to see what's going on, and in quantum mechanics and physics, particle physics, which has to do a lot with CERN. And I never thought of it as a religion. I just thought of it as in these guys are curious people, curious enough that they're willing to dedicate their entire life to figuring out these questions. We can say there's a lot of bad faith people out there. I don't think the institutions that these people derive from, I don't think they're in bad faith. Some people may argue, the idea of science is that they're trying to, like, the objective of science is to try to obscure the real truth, which makes no sense to me. It just makes no sense to me. It just these people aren't pushing science onto everybody. If they were, then that'll be a little weird. I'll be like, well, why are you pushing science so badly? And, some people say, oh, well, they are pushing it. They're pushing it in the schools and they're teaching our children. And it's like, look, dude, I don't mind that my kids are learning earth science, because at the same time, it gives you a foundation. That's how I see it. It gives you a foundation of thought. You want to generate your own thoughts. Well, you need to have a starting point. We live on Earth. Flat earthers and round earthers can agree on that, at least. The discussion starts to go crazy when you have things that, not necessarily things, but when you have ideas that are highly controversial. Like, if you tell me, oh, that's not gravity, that's something else, my immediate question is going to be like, well, how did you come up with that conclusion? Are you appealing to some other authority? Because if that's the case, then, you're just doing exactly what we're doing, which is appealing to the next best thing. I'm not a physicist, but I can go to a physicist's work and see what they've done. I'm not gonna dismiss them, because who the hell am I to say, if I don't know what gravity is, I'm not gonna dismiss anyone who's saying that they have an idea of what it is. Why? Why would you want to obscure that? Makes no sense. If you're really truly about science, then the way you should navigate through that is take all sides, understand all sides. How can you make your own conclusion if you're strawmanning the other position? I hear a lot of people tell people that scientists know what gravity is, and that's a wrong statement. You premise your whole argument on the fact that they think that they know everything. No, they themselves don't. This is what drives a scientist. It's the fact that they don't know. That's the only reason why they wake up every day and strap those fucking boots on and put on their lab coat, because they want to know too. They're as curious as you and me. You don't need no academic credential to highlight a human's curiosity. You don't need to appeal to any authority. You don't need to appeal to anything. Humans are curious. And when I start with that, it's like, it kind of makes sense when a scientist is very eager to figure out how the hell gravity works. We know what it is. We don't know why it is. We don't know, the full mechanics of it. But a lot of people are saying that, oh, we need to dismiss all of this because this is the real thing. Now, I'm not trying to dismiss anything that you bring up, but when you bring something, but at the same time, you're telling me don't believe these people. Well, let me tell you something. That's not the way scientists go about it. They don't tell you, don't believe the flat earthers. They just show you, well, look, you can believe what you want, but we have this evidence. And this evidence suggests something completely fucking different than what you are suggesting. They're never going to say, oh, the earth is round. No, they're just going to say we have enough evidence to suggest that the earth is round. You can make your own conclusion based on this data. If you have something else to interject, by all means. But when they do interject, they bring up this crazy mumbo jumbo about buoyancy and electrical charges and all this fucking weird shit that doesn't make any sense. When you apply it to the hardcore objective realities that we have, such as something like physics, physics is not something that you can just be like, well, that's not true. Well, no, yes, it is true. If you measure distance times time, you can figure out these correlations that are literally correct to the decimal. You know, so it gets a little weird when I hear a lot of people arguing from these points and they think that they have an answer for everything, when in reality, all you're doing is casting doubt. All you're doing. You're playing the defense attorney in this case. The globe earthers are the prosecutors, and the flat earthers are the defendants. You know, and they're saying that the burden of proof, just how it is in the legal setting, is on the state, is on the prosecution. You know, so when people tell me, oh, you know, this is the alternative to gravity, it's like, well, how much proof did you need to come to that conclusion? Because it doesn't look like it's much. It doesn't look like it's much. It looks like these people here that believe that the earth is round, and they're doing a lot more without pushing any kind of agenda. I mean, to my understanding, I mean, religion is way more invasive than science. So, and I say invasive because that's what people will push you more on is believe in God and be good and all this, which is fine. I'm just saying that's not how scientists go about science. They don't have a church where they go and worship these equations. That's just absurd. They just believe in these things because they've proven it. Why do we know 2 + 2 = 4? Because we did the fucking math. The majority of science, the only reason why it's so compelling is because mathematics is one of the tools used to prove a lot of these theories. A lot of people are just lazy and they don't want to do the math. And they look at all these funky numbers and equations and they just think it's mumbo jumbo. But what's funny is that when you start looking into it, it starts making a little bit more sense. You know, so I don't get the idea of having a debate between flat earth and it's like you guys should be collaborating. If you're figuring something out about gravity that the scientists don't know, your approach shouldn't be your side is wrong and my side. That's exactly why it's so repulsive, because that's how they run that agenda. That's how they spew this rhetoric. They use it in a way that it shuts down the other person and gives them no room to even argue anything, because you're saying it's just plain wrong. Isaac Newton was a nutcase, and he didn't really come up with physics, which is wild. It's not really coming up with physics. It's just a way to articulate all these motions that we're seeing with our very own eyes. That's all it is. You know, it's calculating motion. It's the way that things move and why they move and momentum and potential energy and all of these concepts that come from physics that a lot of people just dismiss. You know how many types of different disciplines of science go into making a phone? A cell phone has so many different disciplines of science that it takes to make, meaning it's a collaboration of physics. It's a collaboration of spectroscopy, which is, you know, light, you know, how light interacts, and we're able to figure all of these things out and come up with the perfect device that works perfectly fine in your hand. That was done with math and science, you know. And I always say, if you're going to be a moon denier, therefore you have to be a denier of so many things of science that go into space flight. You know what NASA, well, the A stands for in NASA? Aeronautics. And some people are saying, oh, NASA means the devil in Hebrew or some shit. And it's like, dude, NASA's an acronym. So whatever you think NASA means is purely coincidental, because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm pretty sure their intentions wasn't to fucking name it the same as some fucking underworld god from Egypt. It just makes no fucking sense. Like, really? And even if they did, and it's purely symbolic, bro. Just how they have all these names for these planets and stars, it's all symbolic. Obviously, Jupiter isn't a fucking god, it's just a fucking planet. We just name it that way because we're fucking fancy like that. You know, we're on top of us being curious beings, we show expression in so many different ways. One of them is like naming things and having them attached to some other deity that we've seen or dealt with in our past. You know, now you're gonna tell me that this modern day space agency is somehow attached to something that people referenced millions of years ago? I mean, come on, man. I mean, you really have to have that tinfoil hat on real tight to even consider something like that. But anyway, with all that being said, I just wanted to really firm my ground on the beliefs of these types of debates, because, man, it just seems like these people aren't being receptive to the other side. And they strawman, and it's just so aggravating. So aggravating that a lot of these people, man, if you were to expand your mind how you're telling people to do, because it sounds very counterintuitive when you say open your mind, but don't believe that side. That just sounds so counterintuitive to me. I don't get it. You know what I'm saying? If you want to be an open mind, I would say be an open fucking mind. You know what I mean? I vote conservative, but I will listen to a Democrat. I will give them the time and day, because what the fuck kind of person would I be if I'm over here monolithically putting people into a camp, making my own decisions based on my own biases? That's showing no regard for your surroundings. It's just you acting very arrogantly in the environment. You don't care. There's no changing your mind. You made up your mind 10 years ago. And it's like, okay, well, it defeats the whole purpose of the debate. You know, a lot of these are just pulling clout just to get some traction online. You know, but I just feel like I see right through it. I feel like I see right through the grift. To be honest, the true people that are capitalizing on this are the people that are debunking these kinds of arguments, because, one, it's entertaining. Two, a lot of people see this as a sympathetic situation, because they don't know any better. The flat earth people don't know any better, because they are committing so many fallacies, and they are lost in their own rhetoric, because it's not based on any concrete and objective evidence. It's all based on La La Land and that doesn't make sense to me, so therefore it's wrong. It's like that. You can't go about your day like that. You know what I'm saying? If that was the case, we would still be in the Stone Ages if people thought like that. If people think like that, oh, doesn't make sense to me, so fuck it. We would never progress as a society. We would never sit here and say, oh, we just invented this, we just invented that, if we're going to be sitting at the starting line not doing anything because we don't understand it. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense, and it's never gonna make any sense until they change the rhetoric, or at least be more open-minded. You know, I kind of wanted to segue into a few other things involving NASA. I think it was like a month ago. This is kind of involving the UAP theory. Kind of keep the space theme going with the episode. But few months ago, a general disappeared. who was heavily involved with the UAP programs. The very, very interesting story. Only reason it's interesting is because of the ties to. Let me change the window here. But that's the snap. Anyways, retired Air Force general. This was March 13th. So last month. Vanishes in a 1 hour window. From home, gun and wallet missing. I see these stories and it's a little weary, because if you talk about it in a vacuum and you say, okay, a general disappeared, he worked for the government, the government is very iffy. However, the attachment to, this UAP phenomena, whether it's real or not, the guy was involved in it. Whether you guys believe it or not, he was involved in these programs. And then he disappears the same week that Trump announced that he was going to release UAP materials to the public. Why is that weird? Why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing that up because when a lot of people start asking questions about where this guy disappeared to, they toss around the idea that he was involved in the UAP stuff, but they never truly concrete attach it to the guy. They never really say he did know about you and he did disappear because of this and all this. That's not evident. It's not evident why he disappeared. It's not evident why the timing, you know what I'm saying? A lot of these things are still in the air. Now, at first, I didn't really think anything of this, until I saw this post by the New York Post. I see the story and I'm like, oh, okay. The headline reads, and I'm reading this off my phone here, but the headline reads, another mysterious NASA death as ninth scientist linked to secret program dies. A NASA scientist mysteriously died without any cause of death listed or autopsy, sparking questions about whether he was part of a pattern of deaths tied to U.S. space and nuclear programs. Michael Hicks, who worked on a myriad of NASA space science missions, died in July 2023 at the age of 59. Worked at California's Jet Propulsion Lab. Asked for donations, member to go to. So somehow he was involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he joins 8 other scientists or top officials who have died or disappeared recently. Now, obviously, government, obviously, like I said, when you're involved in the government, there is a stamp on your ass that says property of U.S. government. No one's ever going to take that stamp off. Doesn't matter how far you look, how far you go, how long you've been out of the service. They're always, it's like a gang. When they call on you, it doesn't matter. You need to show up. Now, is this what happened to this NASA scientist? Possibly. The only reason why I say this is because aside from the NASA, aside from the UFO theory, you know, aside from all that, having someone disappearing is a big deal. You got an entire family that's freaking out because this person disappeared. You know what I'm saying? And not only is this guy a NASA scientist, so he's seen things, but this is one of 9 cases of a disappearance or a death involved with a NASA employee. Now, and again, you know, I don't know if you guys see but it's truly interesting because I see these stories and I can't help but to think that a lot of these things are now true. Again, I'm not trying to put my conspiracy theory hat on, but I mean, if you have one death, okay, you know, happens. 2 deaths, I may even say 2 deaths are like, all right, coincidence. 9 cases in recent times. I mean, at some point, someone has to say, okay, wait, hold on. Are we looking into this the way that we should be looking into this? Is it just local police or is this a federal case? You know what I'm saying? I see NASA involved with the secrecy, keeping information from the public, but those workers are part of the public. So if something happens to them, we're going to ask questions. And a lot of people are asking questions and nothing is getting answered. Nothing. You know, I experienced a few things in the sky recently. Nothing crazy. I knew exactly what it was. The day of the launch, the day of the Artemis 2 launch, you know, very public event. Everybody was like, oh, look at this. Here you go. Fuck you, flat earthers. You know, they're all out there. Very touching moment, you know, sending astronauts back to the moon, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was up that night, up late. It was like 2:00 in the morning. And I posted on my Facebook. I didn't get the video. However, they launched another rocket that night. Not a Falcon 9, a full-blown rocket. Why? Why send another? It looked like it still had manned. It looked like a manned craft. You know, it didn't look like a Falcon 9 little thin flame. It looked like it was a full-blown, you know, rocket like the one that they launched earlier that day. A lot of people don't have to believe me. That's fine. I didn't have the video for it, so at this point it's just hearsay. However, when I hear about secrecy around NASA, that was I literally scoured the internet. I scoured the internet so hard that night looking for any kind of article or any kind of mission update by NASA articulating that second middle of the night launch, you know, when everybody least expected it, you know, there they go launching another rocket. Now, again, I don't know how many people saw it, you know, to corroborate my story. I for sure, it was probably a lot brighter than I anticipated. I didn't at first. I didn't really understand why launch another rocket. Then it kind of dawned on me. Okay, well, let's say there's a time delay and the astronauts, you know, already got to their destination prior. I mean, I don't know how that would work in one day, but maybe right behind them, they sent another auxiliary rocket just in case, you know, it was something happened or it's too risky or whatever. I think sending one group maybe wasn't enough. Maybe they sent 2 crews to do 2 flybys. I'm not sure. Another explanation might be that, we may have outsourced our rocket. Maybe someone else wanted to go to the moon and we allowed them to use our rocket. That's another possibility. I don't know. All I know is that it is rather odd that they wouldn't disclose that. I just don't know what was the purpose of that ultimately. I could speculate all day, but I wouldn't even know why even, because it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money they're sending up there, So very, very compelling stuff. Regarding the UAP, phenomena, I saw the recent Bob Lazar documentary, S4, and wow, just very, very, very interesting documentary, because the director managed to get a 1970s video version of Bob Lazar, and I'm over here thinking to myself, you're taking us there. It was just a very, very amazing and very telling documentary. Why do I say that? Because it was the first documentary that we got to see what Bob Lazar saw and confirmed as the inside of an alien aircraft. Now, conspiracy theory time. Is Bob telling the truth? The guy's been telling the same story since the 70s. I still think someone like that can have the possibility of lying. I don't think that, however, I don't think that Bob is lying. I get this feeling that Bob is being genuine. Why do I get the feeling? Because it's just now that he's coming out and saying these things. He didn't start a Bob Lazar show and do all this fucking crazy shit. He's shown his face a few times on TV, but not like the other grifters who have conventions and they have all these things and an online and all this and a website and all that. Not Bob. Is that a tactic? Is that a kind of tactic to kind of help him with his credibility? If he's trying to be credible, he's going to pop up. He's going to show up as someone who's not even interested in the subject, which is a perfect cover. However, if you're trying to tell a story, you're going to tell a story with, look, man, this is just what I remember. I don't know what you want to do with that. You can do whatever the hell you want with it. But this is what the hell happened to me. That's how he comes across. He doesn't come across as someone who's trying to dupe you. He just comes across as someone who experienced something, and after that experience, things turned a little scary. When you're about to die, or when you're on the verge of dying, or someone's looking to kill you, it's pretty compelling stuff, So also it kind of puts you in that, kind of mindset of, why would I lie? I almost died. It's not, the purpose isn't to entertain you. It's just to tell you something crazy that happened to me. I take that back. It is for entertainment, but it's not coming from that. It just seems like it's coming from a very genuine place. That's really the reason why I kind of believe Bob and what he saw. Now, the origins of these things, I don't know. I don't know what he saw. I mean, he said that he saw a backwards flag on one of these crafts. You know, what does that mean? You know, does that mean that we own them? We make them? You know, what does that mean? You know? Now, if we take a step back and we say, okay, let's just assume for a second that Bob Lazar isn't who he says he is. If Bob Lazar isn't who he says he is, that would have been one of the first things that they would have brung to light. This guy didn't even work for the government or whatever. But a lot of these things, not only were they confirmed, but they were confirmed very early into these investigations. He came out in the 90s. Let me tell you, those same years, George Knapp was verifying all of this information. And a lot of these things were coming back. They didn't have Bob in the system. Bob's never worked there. A lot of these things were coming back inconclusive. You know, but then there were other things that were corroborated that it was like, okay, there is no way in hell that if you were making this up, you got that part right. There's just no way, you know, which confirms Bob Lazar's story. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, you know, I can't verify this, but if I explain something to you that only it's information that's only privy to those without messing your clearance, without messing with that clearance clause, there are things that you can describe that if it's corroborated, then your story gets a little bit more credible. You know, also your demeanor, like I said, you know, he's not trying to sell this. He's not selling Bob Lazar t-shirts. He's just not. He doesn't want the type of clout. And whenever he does, it looks like it's a very stressful moment for him. Like he doesn't even want to recount these things. So just another testament to his credibility. But I saw the documentary. I think that I give it out of 5, I'll give it a 4.5. You know, the only reason why I won't go 5 stars is because it is a controversial topic, you know. So I'm going to put it on a 4.5 for entertainment purposes only type bracket, you know, because again, very compelling stuff, just highly controversial, you know. So let's see what else I wanted to get into. So in the context of secrecy and the idea that we were involved in reverse engineering programs with, you know, these exotic materials and technologies, it sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo. However, there are stories that come up that have nothing to do with the UAP, have nothing to do with conspiracy. It's just stories that come out in the news cycle. And, you know, this very interesting piece came out when Trump went into Venezuela and he got Maduro out. I think it was, I forgot the name of the operation. However, it was a very surgical operation where they went in and they, you know, minimal damage. No one was hurt. They got the president of Venezuela. They kidnapped his ass and brought him back to America, whatever the hell. Well, I didn't even know that was on the ballot, but we did it. However, there were reports coming from Venezuela that there was a weird weapon used, you know, and I was just so weirded out by this. I was like, okay, what do you mean? So this is what I saw. Hopefully I can do this the right way.
Now, a new report may shed some light on the methods used by them. According to the report, the U.S. used a powerful mystery weapon that rendered Venezuelan soldiers ineffective during the raid. The report is based on an alleged account of the night's event by a Venezuelan guard. Now, the account.
Now, I'm going to bring it back here. Now, nothing to do with UFO. However, the mention of this mysterious weapon, I can't help but to fill in these gaps by saying, okay, well, we have a lot of secret programs that a lot of whistleblowers are coming out saying that they exist. You know, they're calling for the disclosure of UAP and UFO materials. They're doing all of this, you know, or allegedly they are. And then we got a story like this. The U.S. is using a new mysterious weapon that was making the people vomit blood. I mean, I've never heard of any kind of friggin' gun or laser beam that made you vomit blood. That's some scientific fiction shit. And very, very minimal on the coverage of it, which was also interesting. So I was like, shouldn't we be talking a little bit more about that? Shouldn't we be talking just a little bit more about that? We're just gonna smooth, just breeze past that one. The U.S. used a mysterious weapon. Anyways, here's the weather. Huh? They talked about it for like 2 seconds and then nothing. So it's very, very odd. I think that, you know, to kind of give my kind of take on it, I think that it is the age of technology. I think if we remove the conspiracy away from it, I think that just how we discovered the nuke, we didn't know what the hell that was prior to that. We found out what it does and how destructive it is. So powerful we haven't used it since. However, just because we live in the age of technology, you know, doesn't mean that we can't also be in the age of discovery. We may have figured out the new type of energy. We may have figured out a new type of fuel. We may have figured out, you know, so it's not necessarily, you know, technology, but also the scientific fronts that are pushing on all of these different frontiers are also really helpful in trying, you know, we didn't know what the hell quantum computing was until a few years ago, you know, and here we are already building quantum computers that are amazing in what they do. You know, they can take something that'll take a regular computer years. It can do it in 2 seconds. You know, so hearing about these new weapons, you know, I think attaching the mysterious weapon kind of sends people off the rails. I don't think that the weapons that were used, I just don't believe that it can be taken. I don't even know how to frame this, because when I hear the article say a mysterious weapon, I always tend to go to a very, like, you know, mysterious, man, it can be anything. You know, is it a missile? Is it, you know, because the video showed like these rockets coming down, but people were saying that it was a sonic weapon, and I just don't know what to call that. I don't know what to even call it a weapon. You know what I'm saying? It was used. Yeah, people were reacting to it. But, you know, a mystery weapon kind of suggests that we have a new type of technology, you know, and I don't know. I'm just curious as to how that looks like, you know, how that would even turn out if it were the case, and how will it impact the public, you know, if we have a brand new type of energy source or technology, you know. So I think it'll be a very interesting turnout, especially with all the different fronts that we've had, all the different fronts that we have now regarding science. So, but anyways, That's pretty much it for today, guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Like I said, I'll be having people joining me. I'm trying to get all that set up. Not sure what the time frame is on that. It's probably going to be sometime next week. So yeah, just like, subscribe, check out my other content. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.